Hello BookTube. I am reviewing a comic book again today. This is Vision and the Scarlet Witch, the Saga of Wanda and Vision. On this channel, whenever I review a comic book, I've got the bad habit of doing a long and rambling introduction in which I go through my whole history with comic books. And with apologies, I feel like I have to do that again today. I'll try to go through this quickly, but I really want to set my background with this so I can explain how I'm reacting against it. So, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and like most boys, was fascinated with superhero comics, but didn't have access to them because I lived a sheltered upbringing and my parents didn't approve of superhero comics. I can probably count on my hands the number of times in the 80s when I was a child that I got access to them, usually at a friend's house or something like that. It wasn't until the 90s when I was 15, 16 and had a driver's license, was able to get to the comic book store and had some disposable cash of my own, that I was able to actually get into comics to any degree. I got into DC Comics at the time and not Marvel because, comic books is an expensive hobby, and I decided that I only had enough money to follow the continuity of one comic book company. DC Comics appealed to me more than Marvel because I perceived DC as having an older history. And I was fascinated by the convoluted and ongoing continuity of comics. I was a nerd. This is the kind of thing nerds get fascinated by, how the story had evolved over so many years and so many decades, and how the comic books that were coming out nowadays were still tied in continuity to the comic books that had come out decades before. So I read DC Comics for, about a couple years. Mostly comic books in the 90s, early 90s that were coming out then, although I was able to buy some back issues from the 1980s. So 1980s, 1990s are the comic book aesthetic that I'm most familiar with and most nostalgic for, even though I read DC instead of Marvel. After a couple years, by the time I was about 17, I was feeling that I had outgrown comics. That I was too old for it. It was something that was for people who were younger than me, and I just moved on. But every so often, periodically, I get the urge to go back and revisit it because I still have some nostalgia for it and some fondness for it. And that fascination with the ongoing continuity kicks back in every now and again. As well, being on BookTube, I've been inspired by booktubers like Steve Donahue and Michael K. Vaughan, who are very well read, both of them, in the classics and highbrow literature, but they also read a lot of comics. And so it's made me think that I don't need to choose between reading highbrow literature and reading the comics. I can justify doing both. That being said, though, I get back into comics every now and again. And I'm interested in them to a degree, but I do often find that I'm reminded of why I stopped reading them when I was 17. That as I read through these, I think, okay, this is not meant for adults. This is meant for adolescents. And it doesn't always appeal to my adult brain the way these things did when I was younger. And there's always a certain degree to which that is sad, but there's a certain degree to which that is a good thing, right? You do want to mature and go on and grow as you get older. So maybe you can tell where this review is going. This is something I picked up, and there are a lot of fascinating things in here, a lot of interesting things happening with comic book continuity and developments and the Vision and Scarlet story, and a lot of soap opera type twists. Here's a good one. I just opened this at random, but this is perfect. Oh, there's Norm and Wanda's sister-in-law. Oh my gosh, poor Wanda. Wanda's sister-in-law is having an affair with Norm, and this is going to be one of those ongoing plot threads which is going to continue on through until finally Wanda's brother Pietro finds out that his wife has been cheating on him with Norm, and then he goes crazy, and it's this whole big thing. So these ongoing relationship soap opera-esque type things, and last month I read an Avengers collection. I think that was Avengers Epic Collection number 23, Fear the Reaper, in which Pietro and his wife Crystal were separated. And in that edition, the Black Knight was romantically involved with Crystal, even though Crystal was getting back together with her husband Pietro. So these comics here are from the mid-'80s. That was from the, I think, 92 or 93. That other collection I read last month. So, the story evolves as the years go by. They break up, they get back together, they get romantically involved with other people, and there's this ongoing soap opera, which is comics, or at least it was how comics were at the time. And there's a lot of other things like that in this. For example, I guess while I'm talking about it, there's also Magneto, who finds out that he is actually the father of the Scarlet Witch and Pietro, Quicksilver. And Magneto has always been one of the bad guys. So here he comes for Thanksgiving dinner, and all the superheroes are shocked to see their arch enemy Magneto here. But Magneto just wants to see his granddaughter and his son and his daughter, and he doesn't want to fight with the superheroes. So they have an awkward Thanksgiving meal in which Magneto is upset that nobody is being nice to him or paying attention to him, but he gets tolerated. So a lot of soap opera type stuff in here. That's interesting. And it's interesting to see how these relationships are evolving through the decades or the years of Marvel continuity. But if I'm going to be completely honest, I found this a little bit of a chore to read cover to cover. It's thick. How many pages is this? It's the whole thing is about 450 pages. Took me a while to get through, and it was a little bit of a slog. So, yeah, I mean, although there is a lot of interesting stuff going on here, and I haven't even talked about half of the interesting continuity developments that are inside this volume, they all have to have some sort of fight with some sort of villain in it. And the fights are just really boring, I think. I don't know. Let me know what you think. But whenever the villain appeared and they had to do their little fight and everyone had to run around and punch, I just thought, oh, geez, this is so boring. Now, this is the adult me talking. When I was a young adolescent, 14, 15 years old, I used to obsess over the different fights. I used to read and reread the action panels in the comic book and try and follow all the different blows that took place before the bad guy finally got defeated, and thought it was like the most interesting thing ever. But young boys are like that, right? I don't know what it is that causes that fascination with violence in the male adolescent, and I don't know why it somewhat fades with time. I guess it's an evolutionary impulse, most likely, and perhaps it fades with time because of the testosterone levels that go down as men age, or maybe it's just the maturing mind. As you get older and your mind matures, I don't know, but it's just not interesting to me anymore. I find it quite boring, and every issue has some sort of fight with a villain that I just find boring. And the dialogue is often pretty bad. And again, I'm kind of just picking this at random here, but look. Toad, King, listen. For you or anyone to tinker with machines designed for the stranger is to invite disaster on an unimaginable scale. Not for someone as determined as I am. I swore a vow to destroy those who persecuted me for my differences. Not only the X-Men and the Avengers, but mutants like you who disdain me. And I have thought of nothing else for years now. I know those machines like the back of my hand. How else could I create a Magneto with powers to match yours? Or a Quicksilver? Pow! Pietro! Indeed, during the time of illusion, I finished the work you'd begun on my counterpart, and realized that unlike the two Magnetos, our costumes were virtually identical. I only needed to change costumes at super speed from blue to green. It's been a long time since I saw... Okay, you get the idea. This kind of dialogue is throughout this collection, even though this collection spans a number of years and I think is written by several different authors. That's just, I guess, how a lot of comic book dialogue reads. So, yeah. Now, I know perhaps what you're thinking. You're thinking, this guy, he reads so many comic books on his channel, superhero comic books, and then he reviews them, and he complains about them being superhero comic books. Well, why does he read superhero comic books if all he's going to do is complain about them just being exactly like superhero comic books? And the thought occurred to me as well as I was reading through this. I have been reading a lot of comic books lately, mostly just because I've gotten back to the U.S. I've got access to all this stuff through my library now, and I've been checking out a lot of comic books at one time, just because there are all these things that just interest me. And then, as you know, once you check out a bunch of books, then you're in a race against the due date to finish them. So then I end up prioritizing reading these comic books over reading more serious books that I could be spending my time on. I've resolved what I'm going to do is I'm going to check out less comic books. I'm going to have a new rule. Only check out one comic book at a time. Read it. If I'm going to special order a new comic book from my library, interlibrary loan system. I'm not going to try and time it so that it arrives before I finish the current one. I might just have a few weeks where I'm not reading a comic book, where I'm waiting for the next one to arrive. Going forward. So actually, as it happens, I already have my next comic book lined up right now. I already ordered this one through the library. But after I finish this one, I'm not going to order a new comic book until I finish this one. And I'm just going to slow down on the amount of comic books and graphic novels that I read. I'm still going to read some of them. I'm still have some degree of interest and fascination with the genre for the reasons I had previously mentioned. But, yeah, I'm expecting you'll see a little bit less comic book reviews on this channel going forward. Okay, so let's actually start this review, huh? Vision and the Scarlet Witch. So, the back cover says their unlikely romance is one of the most famous stories of all. I don't know, there's a word that gets covered up here. So from this, you would think that this is the story of the Scarlet Witch and Vision's romance, right? Like, how did the Scarlet Witch fall in love with Vision, who's a robot? How does that work? But that's actually not the story you get, because from the very first issue in this collection, Scarlet Witch and Vision already have a romantic history. And in fact, the first issue in this collection ends with them getting married at the end of the issue. So this is the culmination of their romance story. So if you're looking for the story of how they came to be in love in the first place, how their relationship developed before they got married, you'll have to look elsewhere. But what we do get is after the issue in which they got married, and that comes from Giant Size Avengers number 4, we do get the 4-issue miniseries, Vision and the Scarlet Witch. Now, let's see if you can see the dates here. The Vision and the Scarlet Witch is 4 issues, 1 to 4, and that came out in 1982. So it's a 4-issue miniseries, came out in 1992. The Giant Size Avengers number 4, which precedes it, there's no date here, but that one came out 1974, if I'm remembering right. So we've got a jump in time here to 1982. And then there's another miniseries, a 12-issue miniseries that comes in 1985. So there's another jump in time here. And there's also one more issue here, a tie-in issue from West Coast Adventures, also from 1985. So what happens in these issues? Well, like I said, it's not about them getting married. Sorry, it's not about them falling in love. That I guess has already happened before. But it's about them trying to settle down and live life in the suburbs. And it's also about family. So the Scarlet Witch finding out that Magneto is her father. I hadn't realized this, I guess because I don't know much about Marvel Comics. I thought that it had always been the case that Magneto was the father of the Scarlet Witch and Pietro. But I guess it was in these issues, in 1985, that they discovered who their parent actually was. And then there's Scarlet Witch getting pregnant, and spoilers, at the very end, delivering birth to twin boys. Let me see if I can find a picture of the twin boys. Well, here's one of them. But then gives birth to another one, and there's twins at the end. Now, I really don't know that much about Marvel Comics, so I guess I'm learning as I work my way through these collections. But I do know enough to know that there's going to be a lot more going on with these twins in future Marvel continuity, but I guess you can look that up on Wikipedia if you want to know more about that. I guess like everybody, a lot of this is now knowledge because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And these are some of the issues, I guess, that inspired WandaVision, the TV show about Wanda and Vision settling down to a life in the suburbs. It's a lot different in here. This is not the same story as WandaVision, but it's some of the same stories that inspired it. And many of the same characters, although the characters have different roles. So, for example, Agatha the Witch is in here. Let me see if I can find Agatha the Witch. She's in here. But Agatha the Witch is not the bad guy like she is in WandaVision. Spoilers. But here she is as Wanda's mentor. Okay, so with that as a general overview, let me maybe just start at the beginning and work through this and comment on interesting things as they come up. And we'll see how far I can get. I've got a 30-minute limit on this camera, so I guess I've got 8 minutes left. And wherever I'm at when the camera shuts down is going to be where this review will finish. I've already given a lot of general overview comments, so let's just talk about some of this specifically. So we start off with Giant Size Avengers number 4, which, 1974. This is from 1974. So this is, I read somewhere on the internet, a culmination of the Mantis storyline, which apparently was a big storyline in Marvel in the 1970s. I don't know much about it except... Again, last month I reviewed an Avengers collection from the 1990s in which King the Conqueror was talking about his attempt to marry the perfect woman, Mantis, and how he was foiled in that. So this was something, I guess, that Marvel Comics was still talking about, at least in the 1990s, as part of Kang's story. And King the Conqueror is part of this. He appears, he's trying to steal Mantis. The Avengers are trying to foil him. Meanwhile, that's going on in Plot A. Plot B has Wanda being captured by some sort of demon and the Vision trying to rescue her. And again, at this point, when we join in the story, they're already established to have a romantic relationship. The story here has a lot of interesting things going on, including more time travel shenanigans. King the Conqueror is doing a lot of time traveling, so he's got several duplicate kings that are here that the Avengers are fighting. So it's interesting to a degree. Like I said before, the dialogue, though, is just, well, it's not written for adults. So this is dialogue that if you're reading it as an adult, you just have to be a little bit tolerant of it. So here's a good example. Thor, Iron Man, and Hawkeye. Hawkeye's giving some orders, and then as they fly off, Iron Man says, "Better watch out, Thor. The archer may be bucking for the chairman's gavel." Hawkeye thinks to himself, huh, I hadn't even thought of that. But you know, it isn't such a bad idea. Maybe giving orders would be a good trip to try. And then because Hawkeye wants to be the leader of the Avengers, Hawkeye the Marksman, chairman of the world-famous Avengers, announced today. Boy, that does have a ring to it. The next time I do something big, like hopefully capture King, I'm going to propose new elections. Then holy Joe, it's him in the flesh. Curse you, Hawkeye, you may have discovered me. Etc. I mean, you get the idea, huh? This is... Yeah. As an adult, you're reading this knowing that you're reading something that's originally written for kids, and that's fine. That's fine. Except when you're slogging through a whole long collection of this, where there's some 450 type pages of it. And at that point, maybe it gets a little bit less charming, or I don't know, maybe it was just the mood I was in. But yeah, like I said, my resolve now is to pace myself a little bit more with these comics, so I don't always feel like I'm having to rush to read them and get them back to the library, because I'm reminded of why I stopped reading comics in the first place. Just kind of my limited tolerance for some of this stuff. Anyways, oh yeah, here's Agatha again, Wanda's mentor. And then the story ends with a dual wedding. One is Mantis marrying this green guy. And again, this is something to do with an ongoing story. I didn't completely understand what was going on with this Mantis character. You are kind of jumping into the conclusion of the Mantis saga in this issue. But there was something going on with her, and then they got married. And then, yeah, we bounce forward from 1974 to 1982 with Vision and the Scarlet Witch, and now they've living out in the suburbs, and there's some sort of cursed book and some Halloween figures who will pop up. One of the interesting things about the continuity is that one of the children who they fight in this issue, they have to fight 3 children who get possessed by this accursed book. She's going to show up later as a teenager. She's the one we saw earlier who had found out that Wanda's sister-in-law was cheating with Norm. So I guess that's... So some of these characters will turn out to be important later. Then... Yeah. Let's see, what was this story about? Oh, yes. The Wizard. Yes, so this was interesting. This sent me over to the internet and Wikipedia to find out who this guy was. The Wizard. It turns out he's one of the Golden Age comics. So Marvel doesn't have a lot of characters that date back to the 1940s. But they have a few of them. And this guy was one of them. And it turns out that at one point, he was supposed to be the father of Wanda and Pietro. He was on one of a superhero team in the 1940s. So that little thing was interesting. It wasn't, yeah. going to Wikipedia and figuring it all out was interesting. The backstory isn't all here, but if you go to Wikipedia and you look up these characters,